Hi, my name is Cody Sylvester, and today I'm going to be talking to you about why safety and sanitation are important when working in a laboratory. If you want to avoid an explosion and prevent serious injury, you'd better follow the rules of a lab. Safety and sanitation are important because they can help prevent serious injuries and keep from ruining an experiment. First, I will discuss some universal safety and sanitation rules for the lab. Then I will share a real-world example of why you should wear the correct clothing in the laboratory at all times. Next, I will talk about how poor sanitation led to inaccurate results of a test. And then finally, I will talk about some of the poor health conditions of some third world countries. So to begin, I'd like to go over some of the rules of the laboratory. And starting off, I'd like to go over the clothing that you should be wearing. Now, when in a laboratory, you should always wear a lab coat at all times, and goggles should be worn also. And you should have gloves on if you are dealing with anything that might burn your hands or could be potentially a biohazard. And long pants and shoes are also a necessity in case anything is spilled during an experiment or any broken glassware falls, because it could just fall right to the ground and cut your legs up if you don't have the correct shoes on or pants. And to kind of put this in perspective a little bit, I have a picture of what you should look like when you're in a laboratory. And as you can see, this cartoon guy, he has his goggles on, his gloves, lab coat, and shoes. And not mentioned, he also has long pants on, which is very important also. So another important fact to remember about laboratories: you should never eat or drink anything in a lab, because this food or beverage could become poisoned and could therefore make you sick. Also, hand washing is very important in the lab as well, because it can help break the chain of infection and help keep everybody a little bit safer. Alright, so next I'd like to talk about an accident that actually happened at the University of California, Los Angeles. And in this accident, a graduate student was working with some dangerous chemicals, and she wasn't wearing the proper attire. Instead of wearing a lab coat, she was wearing just a normal sweater with synthetic fibers on it. And needless to say, some of the equipment malfunctioned. The liquid actually ended up spilling, and her sweatshirt caught on fire. Now, she received very serious burns from this and actually spent 14 days in the burn unit before she eventually died of her injuries. Next, I would like to speak about how poor sanitation can lead to inaccurate results of a test. And this actually happens with tuberculosis, which is a very serious infection. And actually 1 to 3% of all positives are false positives, and this is caused by poor sanitation, equipment not being cleaned, cultures being incorrectly inoculated with the bacteria, and just not being clean in general. The bacteria can be transferred from the instruments to the patient, or from the instruments to the culture sample. And one way to control this would be to just clean your equipment when you're done with it, and before you use it, to just make sure you completely break that chain of infection. You don't want anything from a previous patient getting onto the patient that you're working on now. And now I'd like to speak about some of the third world countries. Here are just some general statistics. In Croatia, only about 38% of the laboratories that were conducted in the survey wore gloves. And this is unsafe for many reasons, because your hands could get infected, or you could transfer the hazardous material from the sample to yourself and you could become sick. Another statistic would be in Ethiopia, only about 26% of the laboratories that were surveyed disposed of their medical waste and hazardous material properly. The rest either didn't know how they disposed of it, or they just disposed of it in the regular garbage. Also, another fact is 50% of the labs surveyed in Ethiopia didn't have enough lab coats. So the technicians in the lab would have to share coats, and if you happen to be one of the ones that didn't get a coat, then you're just out of luck. Also, in none of the labs surveyed did they have a first aid kit, or did they wear goggles, period. Some of the effects from that could, again, the technician could become sick or ill or infected with the disease that they're working on. And if the medical waste or hazardous material is not disposed of properly, children or animals could get into it and become sick themselves, and that's just not good. So in conclusion, safety and sanitation should always be the #1 priority when working in a laboratory. Without safety and sanitation, tragedy can affect the workers, patients, and the entire community. If there are any questions, just leave a comment below and I'll respond to it as soon as I can. Thank you for your time.